2, 3, 4.
Run up your engine! Today I'm going to show you how you can fix your car if you get this stupid emissions code. Happens all the time. Now I'll show you how the EVAP system works. We'll open the hood. To keep gasoline vapors from polluting the atmosphere and evaporating, like it did when I was young, they now have EVAP systems. Big old hose goes through the system, comes up through here, and then it will burn the gases at sometimes. Since gasoline vapor is hydrocarbon, it can be burned. It'll burn through the engine. Or if you're just refueling your tank or it's just sitting there in the hot sun, the vapors go through the system through the EVAP canister that has charcoal and stuff. That filters out the hydrocarbons, and then pure air, or at least what they call pure air, comes out of the vent, and it doesn't pollute the atmosphere because the hydrocarbons is gone. Now when you get this P0446 code, that means there's something wrong with the venting system. Well, you really want to start with that code, yes, at the EVAP canister itself. Now in old cars like my Celica, they're easy to get to. You just open the hood. In this case, there it is, right here. Here it is. Well, modern cars, not so simple. Now, some cars, you even got to drop the gas tank to get to the EVAP canister. Horrible design. In the case of this Matrix, we just have to take the left rear tire off. It's a heck of a lot easier than dropping the whole gas tank. Now, when we get under here, we can see, there it is. Not hard to get to. Now this here is the filter for the system. This goes back to the front of the car, and this comes off of the actual canister, which is under further. Now since we're crawling under here, we'll get a big mat and a big steel jack stand so it doesn't fall on our head. Now when we go under here, we can see the whole setup, the giant EVAP canister. And there's a problem here. What often happens is the vents can get clogged up with crud. Now in this case, all the hoses are on, there's nothing clogged up, so we're going to follow the vent the whole way to the front of the car. Because Toyota has a better vent system than a lot of others. They'll have actual vents down there. Spiders can get in there because they're attracted to gasoline vapors for some unknown reason. Does something to their sensory inputs. But Toyota vents in the front, so we're going to take the stop off. Get it out of the way. If we follow the vent system through, we can see the stupid hose came off. A lot of times when people are working, they'll knock these goofy little hoses. You can see this part's ripped. That's just insulation. What you want to do is peel back the insulation, squeeze the clamp. The problem is that rubs on it. That's what made it go bad. So we'll hold that back, then squeeze this on. Now it's nice and tight. And this thing, you can see rubbing on it, that caused the problem. I got this on a little tighter. This should have been made a little bit longer, but at least it hasn't worn a hole in it yet. Now these EVAP systems are continually checking themselves as you drive, and when they find a leak, they trip a code that there's a problem in the system. Thank goodness it wasn't a broken EVAP canister, because on these babies, that big old thing is $375. They're not giving it away. But you can see with Toyota, it's a better design. It's sealed in the back so crud doesn't get in them. You have some American cars, all the crud from the tires gets there and then it jams into the vents and plugs them up, or worse, gets on electronics that isn't sealed that well, then the electronics short out. These Toyota systems are much more bulletproof, as you can see. The only problem with this is the hose had come off. I see that all the time on these. Sometimes it's back here where the hose comes off. Somebody takes the air filter off, then the hoses come disconnected. So if you're ever working on one, check all the hoses, and even better, so everything's working fine before you work on it. Get your camera, take a picture of everything. And then if something goes wrong, look at your picture and compare it to what the car looks like now. You or someone else knocked off a hose somewhere. That's what normally happens to Toyotas. The systems themselves don't usually break, but through human error, hoses get knocked off. Or if they're really old, like my 94 Celica, the rubber hoses just flat rot. Find them and see which ones are rotten and have fallen off, or sometimes they completely collapse. Because realize you have gasoline vapor going through these rubber hoses, and eventually that will decompose them. And when you do replace them with special hoses that are made to take gasoline vapors, not any kind of a radiator hose or a naked vacuum hose that just has air suction. These things have gasoline vapors, and they have to have special hoses or they will come apart. And of course, if you're fixing it yourself, then you want to reset it. You just push erase code, yes, yes, then it erases the codes, and you can take it for a ride. That's the problem, the code won't come back. So realize, even though these EVAP systems are controlled by computers, often it's simple mechanical things that go wrong. Either crud gets in the vent and plugs it up, If you got a low down one, or in this case, Toyotas, hoses accidentally get pulled off. With the Toyotas, it's not common that anything goes wrong with them in the electronics. Now, let's say you're working on a Chevy. Well, the EVAP canister vent valves go bad a lot in those, and even more so on the Chrysler products. They're just cheaply made, and the EVAP canister have electronic vent valves, and they just break, and then you got to replace the vent valve. And unfortunately, in many of the cases, you got to buy the entire EVAP canister assembly because it only comes as one piece, so they rip you off when it does break. Because this big old EVAP canister on a Toyota, hey, it may cost 300 something bucks, but they very rarely go bad unless you wreck the car and they get crushed in an accident. And you can't blame that on the car. So now we just gotta put the cover back on, close the hood. Don't forget to remove the jack stand and put the tire back on. Always fun when it's slippery and wet. But now you know how an EVAP system works and how you can often fix it yourself extremely cheaply. And here's some bonus questions and answers. Artemis Scotty, my friend, recently purchased a 2011 Lancer with 90,000 miles, 6-speed automatic, around 60 miles an hour. Starts to shake the steering. What could cause that? Oh, 90% of the time or more, it's just the tires are out of balance. When they get out of balance, you get to a certain speed, they shake. That's called a speed wobble, because when they're not balanced at certain speeds, they'll shake a whole bunch. Sometimes they'll only shake like at 60, and then when you're going 80, they stop shaking. That's always the tires being out of balance. So just go to any tire place and have the balance checked. Maybe rotate the tires, put the front and the back and the back and the front. Like if you even want to try that yourself, put the front and the back and the back and the front. And if it stops shaking the steering wheel, you can live with it, because if you got tires that are a little out of balance in the back, a lot of times it won't affect it much at all. Throughout my life, I've put the worst tires in the back and the good ones in the front, and they don't shake, and I don't care. I leave it that way. Now, here's an interesting one. A company called Armor has a thin film solar car cover that can recharge an electric vehicle while it's parked. Pretty interesting. You can cover it up. It helps charge it. Now, we're not talking about gigantic amounts of electricity here, of course. They have figured out to make the solar panel. They say that it can be rolled and unrolled 50,000 times and it still works and it isn't cracked. I put kind of a disclaimer on that one because maybe they tested it 50,000 folds, right? But I'm sure they didn't have it sitting out in the sun with the UV rays decomposing it. Do that 50,000 times over the course of, say, if you do it once a day or something, it'd take, 50,000 days to test it, so I'm sure they haven't done that. I'm sure in the real world, this thing isn't going to last 50,000 times. The ultraviolet rays are certainly going to partly destruct the thing over time. All car covers get wrecked by the sun eventually. Now, how it works is, if you're exposed to the sun for 8 hours, it can give you up to 9.3 miles extra driving for sitting there for 8 hours. So we're not talking a massive amount of power here, but I mean, hey, let's say you got an electric car, you don't drive it all that much. A lot of people buy electric cars because they don't drive it that much. Then, hey, maybe you could just keep recharging things, especially if you live out in the desert. And say if you park it a lot and don't drive it, it's just sitting there recharging. Wouldn't be a bad idea for that. And of course, you got to live somewhere where there's a lot of sun. If you park your car in a garage or a covered garage or the garage next to your house, it's not going to charge at all. It's got to be out in the full sun. And you got to live in a pretty honest area because these things aren't cheap. Oh, look, there's that expensive car cover. They could steal it. So, but it is interesting that it's thin enough, flexible enough that you can take it on, put it off. The thing that I'm curious about is they didn't give the price, so I'm sure it's not cheap. You're probably so much better just plugging it into the house and paying the pennies for the electricity than you are to buy one of these things. It probably costs a small fortune. Charlene's a goer, says I got an '08 Mercedes GL 550. The airbag light is on and the seat on the driver's side is worn all the way down to the foam. Help. There's sensors in there for weighing you when you get in for the airbag. That sensor's probably broken. On a Mercedes, it's called the sensor grid. You'll have to replace the whole thing. You'll have to rip the seat apart. It's worn down anyways. You're going to have to reupholster it. Or if you want to try, if you can find a used seat that isn't worn out from a junkyard, have that put in and have a mechanic recalibrate it. You can't replace any of those parts on an airbag system on a Mercedes and expect it to work. It has to be recalibrated by a mechanic. So one way or the other, you're going to have to see another mechanic if you want that airbag system to work correctly. They're that complex. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.